Hi, I'm Liz, and we are the Research Room. We're a space to make research by the people, for the people.
Perfect synergy.
Today, we're going to have Alex talk about another one of his papers. This one's entitled Initial Examination of Social Compensation and Honing Frameworks for Sexual Minority Social Life and Well-Being. That is a very long title. Do you want to just tell us about the paper, give us like a brief introduction?
Yeah, I can do that, hopefully. But I was just laughing while you were doing the introduction. I was just like, is this whole podcast just going to be me talking about my own research like that? No, hopefully I don't do that. Like, that would be ridiculous.
That's why we have you on as a guest to tell us about your research.
No, I want to highlight other people's research. They do much better things than I do. So I promise I did not make this whole thing just so I can talk about my own research.
Oh, I forgot to say why we're doing this. Oh, we should just.
No.
Okay.
Let's keep this going.
Okay.
Why are we doing this?
Why are we doing? I feel like we've majorly failed at this already.
No failing. Keep going.
Okay. So we're doing this because of Pride Month. So we usually don't do a podcast every week, but we figured, hey, with Pride going on, we actually have this paper that's relevant in terms of the content. So let's talk about it.
Yes, absolutely. So, yeah, I have nothing to add to that, actually. That was perfect.
My intro to the intro. Wonderful.
So as far as this paper goes, as Liz said, this I think really highlights some of the positives of same gender relationships that I think really never get shown to light. I don't know of anything that looks at this or finds anything like this, and that's just because people haven't put in the time to look at this. And that's not like shade to researchers.
Maybe a little bit. I mean, it's warranted.
Potentially. Right. But yeah, this was the first study looking at this kind of stuff. So we were just kind of curious about like what are the daily lives like for all types of couples. But of course, a natural distinction here is who you might be partnered with. So are you a man partnered with a woman? Are you a man partnered with another man? Are you a woman with another woman? Are you a woman with a man? So having all these different types of people within these different types of couples, we can see, I mean, are there differences? And not only that, of course, but are there similarities? And that's probably the bigger looming question, I think, is we don't want to just like show like, hey, everyone is just different. Like there are things that like still bind all of us, right? Like our relationships the same across all these different kinds of relationships. I don't know. Like I keep wanting to just say the answer, but am I allowed to say the answer yet? I don't know.
I mean, I was going to go into that next, but first I just wanted to say though, yeah, it's so important. And I totally agree with that because we tend to say like, oh, there's differences among couple types. We typically just study heterosexual couples. So the fact that this research is like looking at different couple types, that's like a huge feat in itself. So good job.
Yes, it is, but it shouldn't be. Like
agreed. Yeah, totally.
But no, I'm glad that there does seem to be more research now. I mean, especially when we started this, there was like nothing, and like now there seems to be a little bit more. So people are definitely trying their best to highlight different types of couples and not just make research about a certain type of couple and
Definitely.
for really ridiculous reasons. But
yeah,
maybe I won't get into that just yet.
So do you want to tell us actually now like what the point of this was, like this study in terms of like doing the research, like what can we actually conclude from our findings? What were the findings? First of all.
So kind of as I was mentioning, like we were interested in the daily interactions of couples. So within that, we wanted to see like, I mean, are there differences when it comes to the couples? What we ended up finding was, and kind of like positively, right, that same gender couples ended up with the better interactions. And so that was all like from their own perspective perspective, of course. Like this, who's to say that like what's objective and like what's subjective? But like enough people like said the same thing over and over again, that like their interactions are better. Or they didn't even say that it was better. We just they separately had their interactions, right? It's not like they were comparing. We ended up comparing after
Yeah.
the fact. But yeah, when it came to like quality of interactions, it was slightly higher when it came to men with men and women with women compared to men with women and women with men. So that was one thing, which is great. And then we had two other things, which is I think I'll sum up as same gender couples ended up being happier. So that is, they felt more positive emotions and they felt like less negative emotions. And this was also just kind of like throughout the day. So we always we bothered people, put it lightly, quite a bit, where we ended up texting them 11 times over a weekend. And
Oh, that's a
in
lot.
those, yes, it's quite a few times. And that was not it. They were also being recorded, and there's a lot of things happening.
Did you ask for their social security numbers and everything else?
Not social security, just bank account.
Oh, good.
No. All the stories I could tell from this. Sorry, I'm all over the place with this answer. I'm sorry.
No, this is fascinating that you were able to like, not recruit them, but like ask like so many times to like get them to participate. Like that's
Right.
good. Good in a way.
I think for the most part, people weren't annoyed. Like some people were like, okay, this is a lot, but like my partner's into it, so I'll do it.
Yeah.
So 11 texts throughout the weekend, and we did this 2 separate weekends, separated by month. So like if we were to do it in June, we did it again in July, just to see like, are these findings reliable? And so we in those text messages, we wanted to see who are they interacting with. So are they interacting with friends, with family members, or their partner? And then if they were just interacting with somebody, what was the quality of that interaction like? Was it generally positive or generally negative? And so when they answered that question, same gendered couples ended up rating their interactions higher, and like slightly, and maybe I'll talk about that as well, but it's not a huge difference, but like enough of a difference where we could reliably find that there was a difference, right?
Right.
So that's what they did there. And then they did the same thing for their emotions. How positive are they feeling? How negative are they feeling? Just kind of throughout the day. And in that way, we could also see like, when it comes to these different interactions and for these different people in their lives, what is it like, right? Like maybe you could end up finding like for certain people, maybe they really don't like their family members, and like that's reliably just always worse than like with friends or with their partner. Which actually, I mean, again, positively enough, like we didn't find that. It tended to be like, I mean, these couples were all very happy in general, so like they had good interactions, like kind of all around.
That's good.
Of course, that's not going to be the case for everyone. By no means is that like, can I generalize that to everyone? But at least for the sample, these were very like high quality kind of like relationships.
Yeah, I was actually wondering if you wanted to speak a little bit more about that. So like the paper talks about like two processes, right? Or like frameworks for this. So one is honing. I was like, how do I say that? And the second is social compensation, right? So do you want to speak briefly like about what those two things are, what they mean?
Yes. So social compensation, that is basically saying that like, if you don't have people around you that you can like turn to, you compensate by going to your partner. So if you don't have good family members that you can talk to, if you don't have good friends to talk to, you will then turn like all of your attention and your energy toward your partner, and you want to compensate for the lack of all these other ties that like we probably should be having for like healthy, balanced lives. And then when it comes to the honing sort of thing, that is more like you are purposefully selecting a small number of people that you want to keep close. So you could talk to all of your friends, you could talk to all of your family, and you could talk to your partner, but you end up spreading it out because like you have good people in all these different like sectors of your life. So maybe they don't all make it, and for various reasons. Actually, maybe I will talk about those reasons right now because that's pretty important for
Yeah.
this topic. So, I mean, of course, when it comes to like the coming out process for same-gendered couples, like that is unfortunately not always a positive experience.
Right.
I'm not going to say it's always negative either, but like unfortunately, it isn't always positive, at least not currently in our society. So when it comes to that, like you can have to socially compensate because you don't have supportive family, you don't have supportive friends. Maybe they are all homophobic or whatever, or just at least not accepting of your partner. And so if that is the case, then maybe you only get to talk to your partner, and you really have to rely on them for all the support, all of the like ups and downs of life. Or maybe you get to be a little bit more in control, and like you get to hone people out. Like
Yeah.
your unsupportive friends and family, you're making the choice like, hey, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. I will find my own family, which is like, I mean that's definitely.
Family is not always blood, you know? It
Right,
can be just the
exactly.
socially supportive people in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I mean, also just quickly interject that like for this study, we ended up finding more evidence for the honing kind of process rather than the social compensation sort of thing. And just generally just because for all these couples, it wasn't that like friends and family were bad for same gender couples. It was really that like everything was good. So it's likely, and I don't have complete evidence for this. I would definitely want to be able to like test this further, but
Yeah.
it would definitely like lend itself toward like the conclusion that if these are all positive, then maybe they're being a little bit more selective with who they're keeping close to them and who they're interacting with, like at least on the everyday kind of like life, right? Sometimes you're forced into negative kind of situations. Like if you do have unsupportive family, maybe you do have to go back home for some reason. Like hopefully you don't catch them on that weekend.
That is true. But it makes sense though, right?
Mhm.
From like a practical standpoint that, if you have negative people around you, right? In terms of like honing, you're going to like be more selective about the people that are in your life. Like
Mm.
say you have negative family members, they don't agree with what you're doing, your life
Yeah.
choices with that, right? It would make sense that you're going to rely more on your partner. You're going to be associated with people like from your community that understand what you're going through, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, in or out of your community, right? Like,
Yeah.
they're luckily supportive people across the board.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think that absolutely that honing sort of thing is just like it's important, and it's something that again, kind of unfortunately, but like there's a silver lining to it, I guess, of like this is very common within LGBTQ individuals, but like this could easily just be like something we all kind of learn to do, right? Like to kind of like shed the negativity out of our lives.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more forced in circumstances in the case of LGBTQ individuals, but it's I think personally, but I don't have evidence for this. But I think personally, well, actually no, I will take that back a little bit because I mean definitely in therapy, right? Like that kind of in like in evidence-based practices too, right? Like it's not just like the therapists are making this stuff up,
Right.
but like they often tell you like you can try to like communicate and like um, fix those kinds of like relationships, or you distance yourself from that, right? Like
Yeah, you put
you
up
don't have to,
boundaries
right?
with those people.
Exactly. And that kind of stuff, like it's healthy for your mental and physical health. But I'm gonna stop blabbering on.
I mean, I have so many questions. I don't even know where to begin now. I think the first one is that, you found all these like positive outcomes, so to speak,
Mm,
with sexual minority couple types. So can we say then, because of the study and because of the findings that they're better than
mm.
heterosexual couples? Like what can we actually conclude from this
Right.
research?
Yeah, and I would say absolutely not. because there's no certain type of person or like couple that like is always going to be better than like everyone else. Like that, like that's unrealistic. I think, right? I think there are possibly going to be positive and negatives that come up in every relationship, right?
Yep.
And sometimes those negatives will outweigh the positives, but like that cuts across the board as well, right? Like it's not that all straight couples are bad.
Right.
And like even from our study, right? Like those were really good like couples still. Like they were very happy, they were very high in interaction quality and things like that, just slightly lower than men with men or women with women.
Where did you actually get these couples? So now I'm kind of
Mm.
curious too, because they were so happy and satisfied. I'm just like wondering like how you recruited them. Do you want to speak a little bit more about like the methods and recruitment?
Hmm. Yes and no. It was quite a lot of energy to do this study. Worth it, of course, but like it was a lot. For 40 years, I was trying my best to get as many couples in the study as possible, and even then, like it wasn't necessarily that many. Just kind of given like our methodology, like it's a pretty intensive methodology. Like we wanted super rich data to answer these kind of more general questions.
Yeah.
Um, so just kind of like given that, and then also like the added kind of things of like we wanted this to only be with like committed couples. So this couldn't include like dating couples. This couldn't include anyone that like if it was a long distance sort of thing, like they had to be living together. They had to be living together for at least a year, and like in this more like marriage like kind of relationship, if not actually married.
So very
Um,
specific criteria
so like
there.
that
Definitely.
right, exactly. So that excludes a lot of people, uh, like off the bat, right? So just finding these couples was difficult, and then finding people who are willing to be recorded, and not just one person, but both people, and
Yeah.
then also that knowing that they would be getting all these text messages and like things like that.
11 times
Uh,
from you. I mean,
did they have a life outside the study? Yes, they definitely did. But like, yeah, maybe you wouldn't think it. Like hearing the how intensive the method was with this. So yes, this was all over Southern California. So like, there's also bias there, right? Like, California in general is a little bit more open when it comes to these matters.
yeah.
It's not like the deep South or anything like that, where you do get a little bit more like discrimination, harassment. And these kinds of things based on sexual orientation. Um, Not to say that that doesn't happen in Southern California, but like
Uh,
comparing the two locations,
there is a difference.
and there's absolutely a difference. So there's like that sort of thing. But I mean, even then, like I was all over the place. Like I was in Palm Springs, I was in Riverside, I was in Orange County, I was in LA, like I was in San Diego. Like
Wow, you
it
were
was,
just traveling everywhere to get these people.
yes, I really was. I yeah, any way that I could, I convinced people that hey, this is worthwhile
It
for
is.
science and for society. So yeah, I mean, I was lucky enough to like just kind of meet and like talk to people and like build that rapport. And I mean, luckily also people were just like interested in this kind of stuff.
Probably because too, you're like the first study, right, to actually
Mm,
like look at this specifically. So I would imagine telling people, hey, this is what we're doing. We're like one of the first. That's obviously going to make them interested and like want to
mhm.
participate.
Yes, absolutely. Not nearly as much as I wanted, but definitely it did. um, yeah, so that's basically it, though. Although I guess I will also say very shortly that when it came to these couples, like they were also across the board with like their backgrounds. It wasn't just like the same kind of couple, like same whatever that means, quote unquote. But like in as far as age goes, as far as education goes, as far as income goes, as far as ethnicity goes, like there's we're really all over the place, and like in a good way, right? Like
Yeah.
because then you can be a little bit more generalizable with this. Um, my youngest couple was 18, and my oldest couple was like 80 something. So
So
it was
definitely
really
a difference for sure.
yes, and yeah, mostly 30s, 40s, but yeah. Uh,
But with
so
what you're
much.
saying about like culture, like there might be
Mm,
different like cultures and stuff, I feel like that would be really interesting to do like a follow-up study. I'm just thinking
mm,
on the fly to just like look and see like, would there be less positive relationship quality or things like that? If there's like an interracial couple, right? And you have
mhm.
you're a sexual minority status. So I feel like those added layers, right? Maybe there could
Right.
be those complications and that could, be associated with maybe not so like awesome uh, whatever your outcome was. I'm like forgetting what it is now. There were so many. That's the
That
problem.
right. Yes. When it came to like interaction quality or to positive negative emotions, like
Yeah.
absolutely. And so I do think that like there is something maybe general, and this is again like this is not necessarily because I have evidence for this, but I do think that this might be something that we kind of tapped into here is that and sort of what I was talking about earlier, because of your question of like the idea of honing in general, like if we all sort of did that, like I think we would all be sort of happy. um
Yeah, I would imagine.
but I mean easier said than done as well, right? Like it's very hard to like potentially cut people off and be like isolated too, right? Like what if you don't find the people that are going to be supportive? Like that is not a good place to be either necessarily.
Yeah.
um
Especially in the
and who
midst of
might
a global pandemic. I mean,
yes.
granted, this was 4 years ago or whatever, but still, nowadays.
Right. I mean, it was a different type of pandemic back then, but I'm not going to speak on that. Um, so, what was I saying?
I lost track of what we were saying. We just got so involved in it, you
Oh,
know?
so the idea of honing,
Yes, that's what it
I think
was.
that that could be like a really good thing. It just so happens again that like it's a little bit more forced in the LGBTQ community,
Yeah.
um, but for any couple that did this and that did this instead of the social compensation sort of thing and like really relied on their partner, like there's definitely research on that, that like if you just rely on your partner, if you don't have other sources of social support, like that's not good, right? Like you
Right.
can't just
You need to
put
be a
everything on one person.
well-balanced person and like have multiple people in your life that you go to that offer you support for sure.
Right, exactly. Yeah, everyone has like different unique things that they can like add to um, these like everyday just like life experiences. um so I think there's like that kind of idea, and then there's also like I mean this is very tied to it, but the idea of like community, right? That like the more like community oriented you are, the less that you have to rely on your partner, and like the less of a letdown your partner will be as well. Like if your
Well, hopefully
partner
you don't see
can't
your partner that way as a letdown because you probably shouldn't be with them. But
yeah.
hey,
But there are going to be certain things that your partner will undoubtedly let you down on.
yes, that is life.
So if you can get that from a friend, if you can get that from a family member, like more power to you. Then like you don't have to like keep nagging your partner to like, hey, why don't you do this already? Like, no, you don't have to. Like you can
Right.
just appreciate them for the positive qualities that they give, and then go somewhere else for those other things. Um,
Exactly.
so I think that's maybe a general thing that we might be tapping into here. So back to your idea of culture. That's why we were talking about
I
this.
forgot my original question, of course.
In that idea, if you end up having to cut people out because of how unsupportive they are, which is I mean, that happens very frequently in communities of color,
Yeah.
and for various reasons. But if you do have to cut off your parents, if you do have to cut off like other siblings or cousins or whatever, right? And you are kind of isolated, like you kind of have to end up doing that more social compensation sort of thing. And like I'm also not going to say that that doesn't work, right? Like that it could work, and especially
Yeah.
like in if it's more dire like circumstances, like yeah, with some support is better than no support, I would say. Um, so and that also probably just depends on like, do you have other resources? Like, are you at least like financially stable and like with things like that, right? Like
Hmm.
maybe you can live that life then. Actually, I mean, money is probably the biggest predictor in everything, but that's definitely another podcast
Yeah.
episode.
It's not everything, but I mean, it is kind of important, you know?
Right. Um, so, uh, yeah, I mean, I think you probably would see social compensation happening in more in different types of relationships when it comes to like if we could sample more from like ethnic minorities, let's say potentially would see more of the social compensation thing, and we
Yeah.
would have to see like does that end up working out or not. Who knows? This could go a lot of different ways. And for
Super
any
interesting,
individual,
though. There should be another study to look at that specifically.
yeah, I would love that. As diverse as Southern California is, like it's still not that diverse. Like there's more diversity to be had, and like going outside of the United States as well. Like there's so many different other like cultural aspects that could be tapped into.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I have so many questions still, but I'm wondering with time, maybe we should just like have you tell us like a general thing, something that you just want to leave the public with that they know about this paper.
Yes, I think you're right that the people have heard enough of me. I've taken up so much of this episode.
No.
Um, but I think it's something to be like hopeful about, and I think especially for anyone who is feeling marginalized, is feeling ostracized by society, and like feels like maybe they don't have a place here, right? Like I think you can be a little bit more optimistic knowing that like it's not all so bad, potentially,
Yeah.
that like a good relationship with a good social network, like that absolutely could help you like not just get to like a good like place of well-being, but like potentially also better than like what we thought was already like the gold standard, right?
Right.
So yeah, there's more to look forward to there, and oh, I don't know. I don't know what else I should actually say here. Like I could go on for like 10 more minutes and I shouldn't at all.
No, but that's
About
like a positive message, you know, that I feel like as more awareness of these issues, you know, comes up and people start talking about it, hopefully that will kind of, you know, help people have better relationship quality, feel more positive emotions, because nobody should like be made to feel bad, right, about who they love, things like that. So,
Mhm. Right. Yeah. There's no crazy difference that you, maybe parts of society would have expected from like this. Like I would probably say more than anything, there's more similarities than differences. Um, and that's like a whole other part of this paper that I didn't get into. But even just talking about like some of these interaction quality or emotion sort of things, like again, the numbers were so close to each other. They were statistically different, but
right.
like practically they were basically the same. Like a 4 out of 5 is kind of a 4 out of 5. Like a 4.5 compared to a 4.2. Like it's
Yeah.
pretty close.
It's right about
Um,
there.
they're both at least over 4, right? Like I
Yeah.
would not complain about either of those.
No.
um, so yeah, there's that kind of thing that like there's probably more similarities than anything else. Of course, there are going to be nuances, and not just like comparing across different sexual orientation, but like for any couple, there are going to be differences. But this happens to be just like one major one that like we kind of want to dispel, and like in some ways we were able to have that preliminary evidence that there's more similarity than anything else.
Well, that's awesome. That's an awesome way to end this discussion. Um, now, what do we need to tell the public? Next week's podcast,
Yeah, basically, we'll actually start to stick to a schedule here, I think, but maybe we'll end up just
We're going to strive for consistency. That's
yes.
what we're aiming for.
But we will definitely have another podcast episode next week. And then finally, you don't have to like just listen to me talk. Like I'm gonna be on the other side of this. I'll be asking questions. Liz will be answering some questions here,
Wonderful.
talking about well, actually, more talking about romantic relationships, but a whole different side of things that I did not cover any of the things that Liz will be
Yeah, you
talking
didn't
about.
talk about actor or partner effects. Well, that will
Mhm.
be next week.
Yes, none of that. No attachment, no insecurity, none of that. But that's why next week exists.
Yes. Well, thank you for tuning in, and
Mhm.
we will see you next week,
Yes,
hopefully.
thank you. Bye for
Bye.
now.
With the sun breeze.